January 23rd has always been an important day to me and to everyone else who was born on that day, I'm sure. After researching January 23rd throughout history, though, I've found that important events in entertainment, politics, war, and civil rights have occurred on this date. The historic events of January 23rd are so widely varied and far-reaching that the date undoubtedly affects each and every person to one degree or another. First and foremost, and probably the most relevant to us today, are the political events of January 23rd. It was in 1968 that the American military ship the Pueblo and its 83 crewmen were captured by the North Korean military for allegedly spying. The Pueblo was fired on, wounding 3, and when captured, the crewmen were taken to Pyongyang, where they were held, tortured, and forced to study propaganda. Americans were enraged, and many people felt that President Johnson was not aggressive enough in the negotiations for the men's return. After nearly a year, the men's release was negotiated, but it was too late for one crewman who died in North Korea. To the great relief of the American people and the world, on January 23rd of 1973, President Nixon announced that an accord had been reached to end the Vietnam War. Negotiations had finally resulted in an agreement that stipulated a ceasefire, the release of all prisoners of war, and the return of nearly 24,000 troops within 60 days. According to Bernard Wertzman, writing for the New York Times, the President said in his announcement that the people of South Vietnam have been guaranteed the right to determine their future without outside interference. Perhaps just as momentous were the breakthroughs in medicine and the fight for equal rights occurring on this day. At Geneva College in New York in 1849, English-born Elizabeth Blackwell became the first woman to receive a medical degree. Miss Blackwell graduated with the highest grades in her class and went on to found the New York Infirmary for Women and Children, which she later expanded to include America's first women's college for the training of nurses and doctors. In 1922, in Toronto, Canada, a 14-year-old boy became the first diabetic to receive insulin as treatment for the disease. Frederick Banting and Charles Best, the researchers responsible for the discovery, were awarded the Nobel Prize in Medicine in 1923. Prior to Banting and Best's discovery, the life expectancy for diabetics was 1 year after diagnosis. In 1977, almost every American with a television set tuned into ABC to see the first episode of the miniseries adaptation of Alex Haley's saga, Roots, the story of 7 generations of African-American slaves in America. That night and the next 6, Roots received the highest television ratings of any entertainment program in history and held that honor until 1983. After a unanimous Senate vote, permanent U.S. Representative to the United Nations Madeleine Albright was sworn in as America's first female Secretary of State in 1997. Having fled communist Czechoslovakia with her family as a child, Albright was no stranger to adversity. She earned a Ph.D. from Columbia University and worked her way to head of the Department of State. Elizabeth Blackwell and Madeleine Albright changed how people thought of women professionally, and Roots changed how people viewed African Americans, both in the media and in everyday life. Without them and the discoveries made by Frederick Banting and Charles Best, the world might be a very different place today. From now on, January 23rd will mean so much more to me than celebrating another year of life. Every year I will think of the accord that ended the Vietnam War, the crew of the Pueblo held for nearly a year by North Korea, and the millions of diabetics who benefit from the perseverance of Banting and Best, and I'll be grateful. I will think of the hardships and struggle of Alex Haley, the Blackwell sisters, and Madeleine Albright, and be proud.